It's the bass.
Listen, y'all, there's no describing me. I'm one of a kind. But in all seriousness, I am a comedian. I am a full-time PhD student, and I work full-time in hospital administration and diversity and inclusion. And, I think I would describe myself as insatiable. I'm just somebody who loves experiencing the world, loves seeing things, experiencing things, and like trying on new challenges.
She's got the trifecta. That's crazy. You're a comedian, and I've been to your shows, Broadway comedy show. What is it? Broadway Comedy Club. Right. I've been to a few of your shows. You've also did a set at the Laugh Factory, which is like a big deal. That's one of the major comedy clubs in the country over on the West Coast. That's a pretty huge deal. And like how do you do that and then work full time and also work towards your PhD? Like, how is that a thing? And then you still have time to like be, just be outside. Like how is that possible?
How you got time to be lit like that?
Well, I wouldn't call it lit. I would say how I do it all is not well. if you just agree to be mediocre at everything, you can do a lot of things. But
clip that, clip it. I subscribe to that.
I'm coming in with the sound bites, y'all. But
it takes the pressure off me to be great. So I'm all with that.
No reason to be great. Mediocrity is fine. You heard it here first, kids. No, but I think that for me, it's really just about identifying what like my passions are and prioritizing them accordingly. And so I'm actually pretty new to comedy. I hit my 1-year anniversary earlier this summer. So, it's a new thing for me, but it kind of took off in this big way. And it's brought me all over the country, which has been such a gift. But one of the things I do to make that workable is I try to build on to existing travel. So a couple of times this past year, my day job sent me to different cities. And so it was a great opportunity to hit up my network in those cities and say, who's got stages? I do the same thing when I go on vacation. My partner and I are about to go to Los Angeles, which will be only my second time this year. I usually go every few weeks, but haven't been back since February. And so, I'm going to visit family and see some friends, but I'm always hustling out in the industry when I'm there too. So I've got a show on Saturday and meeting with some industry folks throughout my stay. So it's really just about creating efficiencies and blending some of my interests together.
Shout outs to Angel, by the way. Shout outs to him.
Yes, Angel. Angel's my angel.
Yo, so I'm curious. You've only been doing this for years. So when did you decide to make the jump from being funny around people to being funny in front of other people? What's your origin story? Who pissed you off?
My origin story.
I caught off.
Well, the Joker murdered my parents, and So basically,
friend of the show.
For me, I've always been into entertainment, and I've always been a performer. When I was 2-3 years old, my dad would set the camcorder up and stream it to the TV so we could see ourselves. And my siblings would kind of be in Gaga land doing whatever, but I'd be right in front of the camera, I'm Ashley Michelle, and I'm 3 years old, and here's my sister, and here's my brother, and it was just so natural. And so I've always loved entertaining and performing. And I love how intrinsic that is, because some people think by doing that, it's really about other people. But for me, it's going into the deepest parts of me and really tapping into different emotions and experiences and expressing them in this way. So, I'm actually an introvert. And so being on stage isn't about the crowds, even though I do draw from the energy. It's really about what's going on inside and kind of embodying that. So then, I still never felt like stand-up comedy was within reach. I was such a fan and studied it in such a deep way, but it's definitely a very specific art. And I just didn't know if I could take my natural excitement for telling stories and embellishing and making it tight enough to, come into joke form and get those laughs per seconds that you need to do when you're performing. So I think, for me, I was like, oh, maybe I should try it someday. And it actually came about, it was almost 3 years ago now. I was out at karaoke with some friends. And one of my friends who is a comedian was nervous about performing. And I pinky swore to him that if he performed that night, I would try stand-up comedy. Took me 2.5 years to make good on that promise, but I eventually did. And, the lockdown was really the thing that shifted for me, because I don't know if any of you went through existential crises. I'm still going through mine. But a part of that was like, what's missing in my life now that like everything's come to a halt? Like, what am I bringing into my life that's just taking up space and not really filling my cup? And what are things that I really need in order to like fulfill who I want to be? And two big themes came up for me, and that was academics and creativity and arts. And I think for me, like growing up in poverty and just kind of like coming from so much struggle, being the first in my family to go to college and graduate from college, my goal was always just like financial security. I just didn't want to be in debt. I didn't want to have to worry where meals were coming from. So even though I always had this creative piece of me, it didn't feel like that would be fruitful to that goal of financial security and my stability that I was seeking. So I always kind of hampered that down. And the lockdown was the first time where I was like, nah, like this is really important to me. And I looked back on my life and career and I realized I had created my own safety net. And so like, if you get to a place where you believe you can't fail, then you boldly go do the things that you want to do. And so I decided I would try stand up and maybe I'd suck at it, but turns out I was all right. And people keep paying me to do the thing.
I love it. I love it. Walk us through your process of doing the stand-up comedy. I'm not going to compare myself to you because the guys give me shit when I do that with our guests. So I'm not going to do that tonight. But walk us through.
Do what you want. Yo, you can make jollof fries on
your
camera.
Signature.
Like, you can do whatever you want. You're the princess of Munda. You can do whatever you want. Which is true.
Well, first of all, it's jollof rice. I'm going to correct you. I'm not going to correct our guest. That's number one. Number two,
you said Princess of Zamunda?
No, I said Prince. Oh, you thought I said Princess? Oh, I mean, whatever.
No,
2022.
Listen, I'm here to just sow my royal oats. So anyway, walk us through your process of creating a joke. Like, how do you do like verbatim? Do you do bullet points? Do you do free form? Do you do impromptu? Walk us through how you put together a set.
Yeah. So I think it starts from like the inspiration of like, what is even noteworthy? What makes me laugh? Right. And so a lot of what I draw from is just the ridiculousness of my own life. I have so many stories that are like, only Ashley Michelle would have that story. Right. And so like, when I think about like my natural awkwardness and like the obscene things that have happened to me, there's so much funny right there. And then there's the observational piece of like what happens as I exist in the world. And, like I just see things that like are dumbfounding. And sometimes these things are tragic in nature, but I always say like, if you can't find the funny in it, then it's just sad. Right. And so some of it is also like processing through like trauma or grief or hurt. And so for me, I'm just constantly coming up with premises or things that I'm like, this might work, this might have legs. So I have a note that I keep in my phone for premises. And sometimes I just jot down a few words. That doesn't always serve me because sometimes I come back and don't know what I meant by it. One of my very famous examples of that is I have a note that says Black President Denier. I don't know what the joke was, but I'm sure it was going to be funny. I just haven't gotten back to it. But like, I'll like write down these ideas. And then I have like actual notebooks that I'll handwrite in. And, it's kind of like how Eminem talks about writing lyrics on the napkin, right? It's like whatever I have accessible, like I don't want to lose the thought. And then when I sit down with a premise, I do actually kind of like build it out. And I sit with like a Google Doc or like my notebook. And I think about like, kind of the general formula of a joke. And then it's really about like, okay, how can I punch this up? How do I get it more exciting, more, get more laughs out of it? but I'm not a verbatim person. I don't memorize my jokes. And, I think there's an important distinction between acting and performing comedy, because I've done both. And I think one helps the other. And you gain skills in each art form that will improve the other. But at the end of the day, they're different. And so it doesn't feel helpful to me to try to memorize it. And what I find is I find the funniest punches and I get to the best form of the joke when I just try it naturally. And I just keep doing it in different venues in different ways and not even on purpose. It's really just what's my recall in that moment? I mean, there are times when I forget to say my favorite punch, but the audience laughs so hard that I'm like, oh, I really like that punch, but maybe I didn't need it after all. Or, times when I feel like I needed to really trim down. And then I got feedback from audiences oh my goodness, can you tell us more about that joke? Develop it. Right. So, the nice thing with stand-up is you are getting live constant feedback because they're either laughing or they're not. And there's no gray area, I think theater is similar when it comes to acting, but if you're doing film or television acting, you make this thing and you put it out in the world and you might read about what people think or overhear, but it's not this instantaneous thing. And with stand-up, you either eat crow or they ask you to come back.
Well, I personally think comedy is much harder than music. Considering I did both, the guys met me, I was a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned when we were out painting the town red a couple weeks back, to me, walking into a room full of strangers and having to make them laugh is exponentially harder than memorizing a catchy song and trying to get them to sing along with you. I just because first of all, especially in New York and the East Coast, we're all hardened by East Coast culture.
Mm-hmm.
They inherently want you to fuck up and to fail. So you have that going in, definitely depending on where you're performing, but for the most part, that's the culture.
Yeah.
And just the understanding of, okay, I don't know you, never met you from a can of paint. I'm gonna make you laugh. Versus here's my song. Do you like it? You either like it or not. And chances are they'll, if it's catchy enough, they'll at least head nod. But if you're not funny, they're not head nodding. They're just like, is that funny? Yeah. So.
And I'm sure you went through this too, where a lot of it is about feeling out the room in that moment. And that's why you can't come in too rehearsed, right? Because there have been times I've gone in and even just visually looking at the audience, I'm like, oh, this is not the crowd for this joke. So let me retool my set. Or, when I think about the crowd work I'm doing and kind of the parts I'm improvising, or even shit happens when you're performing, right? And you have to be able to react to it thoughtfully, whether it's someone who thinks they need to have a full-on personal conversation with you right then, or the server breaks a glass in the middle of your set. I mean, some of my friends have experienced people having serious health issues in the middle of their set, and so you have to be constantly on your toes. And it's like you said, obviously with music, there's an element of improvisation and, there's still a lot of parallels with that live performance, but music, it's okay, I can't hit that note tonight, I'm going to come here. But if you can't find the punch, if you can't say anything funny, if you can't bring them back with you, it's going to be a long 5, 10, 15, 60 minutes, whatever it is.
Once you lose them, it's hard to get it back.
That seems like the loneliest place in the world, just being just being there.
Were you the funny person with your friends, or did you just jump out there and jump into the career?
It's interesting that you asked that because I think yes, and I see evidence of me kind of being the class clown and the goofy one and all that, and at the same time, I was always the goody straight A student, teacher's pet, straight and narrow, follow all the rules. So I have 3 younger siblings, and they'll all tell you that they are beyond surprised that I'm the one doing this out of all of us. And that they experience me as much more stoic and serious. And I'm out here slinging dick jokes. And they're who knew you had that in you, And so it's just, it's interesting, people's perception. But at the same time, I grew up in a large family, multi-ethnic family. There was a lot of sarcasm. There was a lot of high volume communication. So, you know, I think like in some ways, like the environment I was in was just so conducive to it. And then, you know, I think because I'm such a good student, it like made me obsessive about learning the craft. It made me obsessive about like, you know, watching other comedians do what they're doing, understanding like those comedians who have kind of bucked the trend and recognizing that there's no exact formula, but there are certain guidelines that you can follow to kind of make things work. There's actually a podcast called The History of Stand-Up, and it's co-hosted by a professional comedian named Wayne Fetterman, who has done stand-up, acting. He actually teaches stand-up comedy at USC. And, you know, again, I was like so nerdy about it. I would listen to this and I was like writing down names and I was like, okay, Dick Gregory, this is somebody I need to know. I need to do a deep dive. I need to understand, like, you know, and I think because I'm someone who's so like socially conscious and like really like, you know, those values of like equity, justice, liberation are so important to me. It's also been really important to understand like how I can like represent that in my comedy without being like preachy or like, you know, how I might be in the classroom. But really like just make people laugh. And like one of my favorite things to do with jokes, and you go, I'm sure like you've been there before, is like, you know, you do the sneak attack. Like you make the audience think like, hey, we're joking about this thing. And by the end of it, it's like, oh shit, I learned a lesson, right? So I have jokes about racism, misogyny, pedophilia, like all kinds of shit, right? But it's like, I'm not beating you over the head and saying, this is bad. I'm just like, you know, bringing you along on a journey and a story with me. And then you come to your own conclusions.
Who, it's saying Hugo is funny, by the way. Who are your top 3 inspirational or your top 3 favorites that you like kind of pull from when it comes to your comedic expertise?
Of all time. Of all time.
Okay, of all time.
And why aren't they women? No, I'm playing. Nah, but go ahead.
Why are they all white?
Yeah, why are they all Jerry Seinfeld? Why is your top 3 all
culture? Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you know, I think certainly there's some of that, right? Because like I think we're all of an age where we didn't experience seeing a lot of people like us, and it was so rare. And one of the passions that I have, and I often think about like writing a book about this someday, is like the hidden figures of stand-up comedy with an emphasis on women and women of color. Because, you know, I would challenge any of you to think through like your own historic knowledge of comedy and comedians, and like you'd probably be hard pressed to put any women in your top 5, let alone to even, you know, be able to recall 5 of them separately, right?
Tiffany
and
Ali Wong.
I mean, there's the current, right? Because it's like things have moved.
Nicki Minaj, Cardi B.
What? No.
Turns out I'm with the Yale of podcasts, so yeah. But like, okay, right? We know like women, right? But it's like, especially when you look at historic, like, you know, you've got women like Moms Mabley, who was so deeply impactful in the journey of like every comedian, right? Like not strictly for women and women of color, but like not really getting her due and not like a household name. And she was performing like decades ago when like, you know, I mean, there were still segregated venues, and, you know, like people like Moms Mabley and Dick Gregory are still going in the back door and using like separate toilets from their colleagues, right? So so I think that's some of it is like, yeah, I mean, all of my influences are not white men, but naturally many of them are going to be because that's what I saw. I would say Richard Pryor is huge for me. And it wasn't really until later in my life that I was able to appreciate him as much as I think he should be. But when you think about like everything he was achieving and all of the boundaries he was stretching, and beyond that, just like how purely funny he was. Like, I think Richard Pryor is phenomenal. Similarly, I would say George Carlin was on one. You know, George Carlin was so ahead of his time and really talking about things that mattered back in the day. Yeah, I mean, I think like don't necessarily stylistically appreciate every comedian present day or in the past. But, I think about like some of the ways that Joan Rivers opened the doors, and, I'm not a roast comedian. It's not my preference, but I can still appreciate like what it meant for her to have like a late night talk show and like to exist in this space. If we look at modern day, of course, like Ali Wong is my like one of my comedy North Stars. I adore her. W. Kamau Bell, who is lesser known as a stand-up comedian, but is a stand-up comedian. Had an amazing show on FXX back in the day called Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell. Has written a book, had a Netflix special called Private School Negro, and is currently the host of United Shades of America on CNN. I think he's one of the most brilliant comedians. And like so when I first saw Kamau perform, it was like the first time that I was like, oh, like you don't have to be offensive and problematic and like inevitably like alienate some part of an audience. And that's the only way to be funny, like I saw him being really inclusive and inviting and like, just like saying shit that mattered, but making people like piss their pants laughing. Similarly, Hari Kondabolu, who's from BK. So, I know we've got New Yorkers here. So like, Hari Kondabolu was so much like that for me. There's this cat out in the UK named Russell Howard, who I think is one of the funniest humans on the planet. He has, he's had a number of shows on TV over the years, and I rarely get through an episode of his shows without crying, laughing. So, I just draw from where I can. But like, Jim Gaffigan, I think is one of the most insane comedic feats. The man does clean comedy, has been relevant for decades, still fills out arenas, and has this comedy that's so relatable. Like he and I couldn't be any demographically more different. But when I hear him tell jokes, when I read his books, I'm like, this man gets me. Mainly because I love food and like, we're two fat people who enjoy food. But I think it's just like
hot pocket.
It's not delivery, it's DiGiorno.
Yes.
My favorite is still Eddie Murphy and oh my God, Godfrey. Yes, Godfrey. I saw Godfrey. I saw Godfrey on my birthday last year. I was sitting in front row and I was crying the whole time. It was so freaking funny. Speaking of Godfrey, I did have a question. I always have this question when I meet comedians. So I've seen Godfrey and I've seen Chappelle, and I'm going to see Chris Rock next month as well. And I'm pretty sure they're all have the same setup right now.
Wait.
What's up?
You seen the Kevin Hart Chris Rock show?
So he's doing Radio City. I don't know if he's bringing Kevin. I think he's just by himself.
Yeah, I think their duo tour is done.
Yeah,
I think they just had like a few engagements.
Yeah.
When is the Chris Rock one? I'm coming with you.
That's October 7th at Radio City, and the tickets are really cheap actually. Like seven. I got mine for $70.
All right, continue. All right, back.
I love how that's cheap. You feel free to buy my ticket.
You're really cheap.
Right? Like, okay, baller.
It was actually $90 with the service fee, so I take that. They weren't cheap. They weren't cheap. Anyway, sidebar. So I always ask this question. Currently, with the whole cancel culture and the woke mob and so forth and so on, I noticed when I saw Chappelle at Radio City a couple years back. I noticed when I saw Godfrey at the Comedy Cellar last February, and I'm pretty sure Chris is going to have the same setup. Comedians they're forcing fans to lock up their phones and not allow them to bring them into the venue to prevent the cancel culture. Got people from taking clips, put them on YouTube, adding their own narrative, or taking sound clips to try to make them out and cancel them and try to ruin their careers. How do you feel about that particular tact right now with comedians? I personally love it. I mean, I think it's necessary because the quote-unquote woke mob is out of control. I mean, you got cancel culture. I see the pros and cons. Yeah, you want to cancel like racists and assholes, but digging up old tweets and finding 5 or 10 second clips from a stand-up routine and saying, hey, look, she's a racist. he's a racist. He's a racist. She's a racist. Like or they hate trans people or whatever. So it's like I understand it, and I it makes sense to me, and I get it, and I'm actually 2 thumbs up for it. As a comedian, how do you feel about that tactic right now being used across comedy? Because I'm pretty sure that's norm. I'm pretty sure a lot of comedians and venues are doing that now.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming more and more common. And you also hear about comedians who are turning down gigs or pulling out of gigs when there's any concern about that. There are a number of comedians who've been very vocal about not wanting to perform the college circuit. And look, I mean, I think that I want to humbly submit any opinion I have because we're talking about the mammoths of the game. So I don't want to pretend to know what it's like at that level. What I will say is that I try to exist in a way as though I'm always being recorded and anything I'm saying can be documented. And I always try to exist in a way where I'm willing to take accountability for my mishaps and to just come to it with a humility of, look, none of us were born out the gate knowing all the things and being like, inclusive warriors and just kind and good to all people. And so I think about all the times that I've messed up, and I've been so grateful for the people who have been loving and kind and compassionate through that. I think something that I struggle with that really seems to come at the intersection of masculinity and kind of this machismo culture is, and I know this may not be popular as I stare down for men, but I think that there tends to be this pride of like, don't come for me. I said what I said. You don't know me. Like, mind your damn business. And I think if any of us consider a time when somebody has like hurt us and wronged by us, like made us feel some kind of way, that's not really like a productive response, right? It's more like when people like take accountability and own their shit. I think about like in very recent examples of music, you had both Lizzo and Beyonce use a word that was really hurtful and alienating to a huge faction of the community of people with disabilities. And they heard that feedback and they didn't double down and say, look, the record's been cut. You're stuck with it. Get over it. 80% of my fans are still riding. They, were like, we're going to take the time, the money, the energy, the effort to re-record and do better. And it's kind of that mentality of when you know better, do better. So whether or not comedians feel safe to try their material and put their foot in their mouth, I mean, I totally understand. And it is an anxiety I have that, like, even as someone who tries really hard to just be like, kind of staying up with culture and creating space for people, like, we all mess up. And it's scary to think of like being able to mess up on such a global scale. But I also think we have a lot of examples where people have owned it in really meaningful ways that have allowed kind of public court of opinion to side with them, So I think regardless of where or how your things come out, I think the more important thing is that you own your shit and be willing to do better.
I agree with that. I think when it comes to things like that, people are put in a weird position because, I come from the standpoint that you can say whatever you want, right? But you're not necessarily free from the consequences of what you say. So it's like for example, when people went after Chappelle, right? I'm thinking that from his standpoint, I think like a responsible way to handle it would be to have like a greater conversation and not necessarily play the victim, particularly when you're like one of the most successful people in show business in history, right? So I agree with that tact. I think people should be willing to own it. And let's say it is something that they do double down on. I would rather them be truthful in how they present themselves. Because there's, in my opinion, it's like if you're wrong and strong, at least I know where you're coming from. At least we all know what we're dealing with, as opposed to people who maybe tailor their message but don't really haven't learned from it, really haven't subscribed to it. You know what I mean? Just playing PR. So I don't know. I think it's one of those things where there's no like perfect answer, like you alluded to before. There's no combination of words that you can use that's gonna please everyone. At some point, you're gonna mess up, or maybe not even mess up. At some point, you're just gonna say something that someone else doesn't like for whatever reason. And I just think having accountability, that's all you really can do. And I think if you own it, have accountability, and handle it regardless of whether you double down or not, like, I think that's the road to sort of getting to a better place. Because what I see in this public reaction is like when people say something that somebody doesn't like or a group of people don't like, and they just kind of give some sort of mealy-mouthed apology but don't actually change anything, people can sense that insincerity, you know? So, it's tough. It's tough.
Listen, Papa John spent 21 months trying to learn how to stop saying the N-word. So
Papa John, well, they hired Shaq. They hired Shaq
after 60 years.
Yeah, and then hired Shaq. Hired Shaq to be the CEO.
Yeah, that's how much money.
But I mean, it's like, you know.
Better, right?
No, but I think what you're saying is right on, Edwin. Like, you know, for me, it's like at the end of the day, you got like people like DaBaby who are like, nah, like I really hate queer people. And so he's got to cancel his shows now because nobody's riding with that message.
But at least we know where you stand.
That's what I mean, right? It's like,
we know
you do you. You won't sell tickets,
we know,
but like,
we know you. You know?
So much for the box.
Fab is like,
it did not go that smoothly, sir.
I'm not saying it went smoothly, but
even with that, at least we know where you stand. It still didn't go that well.
No, it didn't. This
is a culture. Going to Ugo's point, this is a culture of PC, bro.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is that I'm not saying necessarily the outcome, but it's like someone like him, even if things quote unquote don't go well, he's gonna be fine at the end of the day. Like,
and he'll know who his people are and who they aren't versus like what Ed's saying, when you got somebody who's like giving like this half-hearted fake like PR written apology.
He's fine.
You don't know how to come at them.
You can say in the greater culture he's looked at a certain way, he's being canceled, whatever, but you know, he's gonna have his money regardless, he's fine, he's gonna have his fans.
So what this person got
and we know where they stand.
What happened?
No.
Well, here's no. I'm with Fab here, and we kind of mentioned this too a couple episodes ago when we were talking about the whole Will Smith thing, and you know, celebrities that get caught up in some foolishness. Like, are they gonna be bankrupt tomorrow? No, but they're gonna take a hit. And
that's
but
fine.
should you not? But shouldn't you? If you're like,
I'm not saying that they're not.
I agree. No,
I'm not saying that they're not. But if they take a hit, they take a hit.
Right? Exactly. I agree.
No. My thing is. So
he's just gonna. DaBaby's gonna spontaneously combust. It's just over.
See, the satire he's rolling out is funny. But what I'm saying is, the hit is taken. The fact that their career is now attached to that. It's undeniable.
It's over.
You see what I'm saying?
No. I'm gonna.
But that's with everything. If you're a public figure, everything you say is attached to your career.
And I'm gonna push back on that because
everything.
Yes, it's attached to you, but how many of
you don't? But
how many of them?
Do anything. You could do what you want. He chose not to be. Wait, hold on. Let him talk. I didn't hear what he said.
I want to hear Fab, and I want to hear Ashley Michelle.
Yeah.
If you're going by that mindset of you could do whatever you want, sure, bro. But no, you have to be PC to maintain a specific standpoint and a specific fan base. I.e., Chris Brown, he did whatever he did a long time ago, and you probably can't even name his last album, bro, because he got shut down and they blacklisted him.
He's doing just fine. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
You're looking through a very narrow lens of like what you.
The man's a crackhead now, bro.
Wait, what, bro?
Guidance, bro.
Wow, that's a bold.
Bro, you're extrapolating. Hey, this is what.
DK, no guidance came out in 2017.
And that's fine. Yo, honestly, the whole
Wait,
thing.
so are you saying like cancellation will yield drug addiction? Is that what we're
Half and half.
No, but like,
But
I think that
remaining
like
PC,
there really
I don't know how y'all
isn't an
saying that
example.
PC.
There's no example of anyone who has had permanent damage.
Exactly.
I think men of
There
color
is
tend to
none.
take
There's
a bigger
no
hit
example.
than white men, right? But like you take an example like
Unless you
Alec
actually
Baldwin.
committed a crime, unless you actually
No, even
did something
then,
crazy. But even then, you come back.
Michael Vick had his full fandom when he returned to the NFL. Chris Brown has his full fandom and still sells tickets to concerts. Louis C.K. has the nerve to continue to show up on stages here in New York, and people are riding with him. People bought his special he released online. So if you could show me an example of someone living in an alleyway as a result of being held accountable, I would say, okay, we need to.
You guys are looking at it from the standpoint of major binaries, from one standpoint of fame to the end where they're completely lost, and that's not what I'm referring to. I'm specifically talking about them not having what they used to.
Right, but I don't think they should.
But that's
but that's obvious with anything that you ever do.
I'm not done.
Let him finish.
You can't sit there and tell them that, oh, you didn't die though, so you're good. You're not in the alleyway, so you're good. No, they took the fucking hit, bro.
Yeah.
But no one's denying that.
I'm sorry. You guys know we're talking about.
It's not enough of a hit for it to be a big deal. So I should not remain PC now. That's bullshit, bro. What are you talking about?
I agree with Fab. I want
to hear what TK got. TK, where you at?
Saying, but it's not quite hitting. I'll say why.
Wait, I'm sorry. We're talking about entertainers. These motherfuckers aren't curing anything, so they're making less millions than before. And you know what? That's just the price you pay, bro. Like, those weren't their real fans anyways if they did because of that.
What about R. Kelly?
What about R. Kelly? And slow down. And this is a multivariant thing, right? Hold on.
What about R. Kelly?
What about R. Kelly? Can we?
Yeah, let's talk about R. Kelly. Right.
Because it doesn't matter.
He's in an alleyway.
Okay, hold on. But
alleyway.
that's different. He got convicted. That's not
it's
a conversation. What?
That is not different. He kissed on those little girls over a decade ago, and he was still allowed to tour. He was still allowed to make music. He still made millions. Exactly. The fact that he went bankrupt is on his dumb shit. He should have learned to read when he was a kid, so he knew what fucking contracts he was signing. I don't feel bad for that motherfucker.
It came home to roost. No, I'm with.
But it had nothing to do with what he said. It's what he did.
I'm with that.
But here's my thing. My thing is, if we're talking about PC, it's not about being politically correct. It's about being culturally relevant. And if the culture is saying that shit don't fly no more, and you're like, well, I'm clinging to it, that's on you that you didn't evolve with the culture. So you shouldn't have the same stance that you used to if you're not staying culturally relevant.
I agree with that point. I'll take it a step further, and it does tie into Will Smith. And I said this before. The rules are different when you're a person of color. When the gatekeepers decide to hit that fucking pause button, that pause button is hit. So the whole, it doesn't matter. Oh, you can take the hit. He'll be fine in the long run. No, miss me with that. If the gatekeepers decide to hit that pause button on your career, I'm not saying you're going to be naked in an alleyway broke, whatever, but you are going to take a hit. It is
but
going
how
to
do
be
you
reflected.
change?
No,
it's going to be reflected.
That was the
argument. What's the incentive to change if it doesn't hit? What is the incentive to do better if you don't feel something?
That's a case by case. Everyone's different. That's a case by case scenario.
And I think people should be held accountable.
Yeah.
There should be consequences when you miss the mark.
No,
I think
agree.
So. And if you try to slap me, try to slap me at one of my shows, I'm gonna come for you. Okay, I'm not Chris rocking that shit. We are gonna brawl.
And it's like a multivariant thing. It's like we see the visible things that could, give someone's career a hit, but there's so many factors that go into it as to like the content itself, not just things that goes against the culture, but there's just so many things that go for it. So when someone says, oh, this ended their career, I don't really see an example of something ending someone's career unless they get convicted of a crime like R. Kelly. Like that doesn't happen.
M. Night Shyamalan keeps putting out shit movies, and the man keeps getting multi-million-dollar budgets. Nobody's out here getting canceled.
Somehow Woody Allen's still around.
Right? People are just getting accountable.
Harvey Weinstein.
Just to be clear,
well, he got convicted.
I just think his movies are crap.
You guys are like conflating different things that we're not talking about. But
yeah, you keep saying that it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want.
That's not what I'm saying. Bro, okay.
Bro. He's like, he's not dead. He's waiting at the bus. I'm like, bro, what are you talking about?
Different than a tasteless joke. Or saying something like, or that's completely, you don't rape somebody out of context, be like, you know what
that is true.
Put that shit on a t-shirt.
Yeah, you don't rape
that goes on a t-shirt. That's a Yahtzee right there.
That is it. Yeah, we'll cut that out. That's a clip it.
Yeah.
That's a clip it, bro.
T-shirts available now. 5-Star Dancer streaming on all digital platforms.
So, comedy thingy. I know you also act, and I saw your little thing where you were on With the Seasons, which I think you did fantastic. And I thought it was a really tough scene. But I thought, like, well, not I thought, but I was not surprised. Me knowing you specifically through Matt and, like, the comedy stuff, like, that I see on IG, I thought maybe you would be more into comedy-style movies just because of, I guess, how I've been learning to typecast people. So, do you like just acting in general? Do you have a specific genre? Or are you just trying to figure shit out?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I do love acting. I love embodying characters. And so whether that's funny, dramatic, sad, happy, you know, whatever it's drawing from, for me, some of it is cathartic, right? Because some of it is like being able to pull my own shit into it, even when it's not like directly connected, but it's like, you know, I really believe there's like a universalizability to the human experience. And it's why when any of us watch movies or TV shows, like it hits us some kind of way, right? Because like you can see yourself in a character. So With the Seasons, which is a short student film I was in a couple of years ago, was like a really heavy script. And it just, you know, drew from a different part of my brain. But I really love that because, you know, my thing is I just really like making people feel things. And I like being a part of that process. So, you know, with comedy, I get to make people laugh, but it's deeper than that. You know, I think a lot of times for me, I'll get into this mindset of thinking like, oh, I'm just a court jester. I'm just here to like perform and get a few laughs. But, you know, there have been times when people have told me about the serious impact of what laughing has done for them and what, you know, my jokes have done for them. And it really brings you back to like, again, like, how are you impacting humanity? You know, there's this story about a guy who, he has multiple forms of cancer and, had just been coming back from a very invasive appointment that was super painful. And he had a 4-hour drive to get home. And he popped onto a social media app where I wasn't even doing a set. I was just kind of like effing around with my friend. But the way we play off of each other is just so like organically funny and silly and out there and outrageous. And he told me after that time, he sent me a message and said that for the 4 hours he was driving home, he didn't feel his pain and he forgot that he had cancer. And if that's all I've ever done on this earth, like, that's it. Like, take me now, Lord. But, you know, but I think that it's that ability to connect. So like With the Seasons, which was written and directed by the very talented Roger Castillo, this was an example of like telling a really important and meaningful and relatable story of, you know, a Black man lost to senselessness and crime and, you know, what it's like in the hood. And then, you know, his Black brother trying to process that and work through emotions in a culture where boys and men, and especially boys and men of color, are socialized not to feel, not to have skills to feel, and generally are leaning towards unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so it was like, I was so proud to be a part of that story where we could showcase some form of healthy masculinities and kind of question, like, what would it look like if men could be authentic, if they could feel, if they could, just be themselves. And that's something that's really important to me. So I love dramatic acting. I also have a life goal of being dead hooker number 2 on Law and Order. So Dick Wolf, if you're watching, look at this chick. I got legs for days. So, I think for me, it's like being able to do a diversity of things and just tap into different parts of me. And it's the challenge of it. It's like, how do I get into this character? What's their backstory? And how does that connect with mine? And what can I bring from my own lived experiences and the world around me that's going to make this meaningful and not feel like just kind of like a caricature, but something, where people watch and they're like, oh, I see myself in this.
You are right. We are all broken. These 4 men of color are broken, and
which is why I'm here. I'm here to fix you. This is actually a reverse intervention.
That's basically what she said. She was like, you know what? I did this thing, and I'm here for you guys. And also speaking about hookers on camera, Kamaria, who was a previous guest, she was one. So we need to, she's an actress.
What's up, Kamaria?
Wait, Apple, chill out.
No, she's an actress, and she played a hooker on camera in one of her roles. So
that's gold.
But she wasn't dead. She had lines. So
no, that's goals right there.
She's a line hooker.
No,
a line hooker.
If you live in New York and you're an actor and you haven't been on Law and Order, you're doing something wrong. So, like, Dick Wolf, I see you. Okay, when's my time? I could also be the prosecutor. I could be the unknowing. You
have prosecutor vibes right now. Like you have the glasses. You have the hair, the glasses. You got the prosecutor. Like,
You're so much.
I'm
more
like
than
Brown Casey Novak.
You are so much more than a dead hooker. I just want to know that. So
you're at least alive. At very least, you're on life support. At least
put that on my tombstone. You were so much more than a dead hooker.
No, that's going on TikTok. That's going viral.
That's gonna be my first comedy special. So much more than
a dead hooker.
Now streaming.
So you're so much into like show business and performing arts. What about the PhD? What's going on with that? Because you've told me about it, but like tell the people.
Yeah, so like I said, during lockdown, there were 2 kind of major things that I wanted to itch, and one was my passion for creativity, and the other was scholarship, because I'm a lifelong professional nerd. I love going to school. I love being in class. I love learning. And that doesn't need to happen in these formal educational settings. And I want to challenge white supremacy culture that says it should. However, I think for some people, these institutions can be really meaningful. And one of the things that I've tried to do throughout my career is kind of like decolonize higher education and imagine what would it look like if these systems that were designed to exclude us purposefully were reimagined from an inclusive place where we belonged and we were part of it. So for me, there's always something really radical about my pursuit of education because, like, again, these spaces weren't designed with people like me in mind. I'm also the first in my family to graduate from college and the first to achieve my master's degree. And there was just part of me that thought, like, I am standing on the sacrifice and the blood, sweat, and tears of so many people who didn't have the opportunities that I didn't have access to resources like I do. So it almost felt like a duty. And so I always had this kind of arbitrary goal that before I turned 40, I would get my PhD. When we first went into lockdown, I was 35.
Goals.
Like, if I'm going to do this, probably started soon. And so at that time, I was just researching programs. I had no intention of applying yet, but I was just looking at what this could look like. And as I went through that process, I discovered this program that really spoke to me. And so I'm currently studying a PhD in education and leadership. And my focus is on destigmatizing and decolonizing mental health care for Black men. And I've always done a lot of work in men and masculinities. I feel really passionately that if we support our boys and men socializing in ways that are authentic to them, instead of insisting on these very narrow ideas of what it means to be a boy and a man, like everyone wins, right? Because ultimately nobody fits in the narrow confines of what society calls masculinity. And so, leaving room for all the like messy and in between. And then, I think there was that spring where, of course, we have seen throughout our entire lifetimes and throughout history, the systematic murder of Black and brown men and Black and brown bodies in general, right? But like, I think that time of being in lockdown for COVID and watching Ahmaud Arbery get gunned down, and then, you had George Floyd's murder and the way it kind of like revolutionized some of the conversations. And for me, as someone who does diversity, equity, and inclusion work for a living, it was just a really heavy time, because not only am I needing to experience this and process this and go through my own kind of grieving around it, but then I'm also supporting other people. I'm also showing up in educational spaces. I'm also holding space for people who aren't as far along in their journey and are meeting with some ignorance or resistance, right? And that's really heavy shit. But one of the things that has always been a guiding force for me is therapy, and being able to have that space and to like, not only go to my therapy sessions, but to learn tools and strategies to honor my mental health and to maintain it. And there are so many statistics that make it expressly clear that Black and brown men are not accessing mental health care. And there is a multitude of reasons for that. And that even when you all do, it can be very dangerous and life-threatening, because we have a workforce of mental health professionals or mental health care professionals rather, who are ill-equipped and culturally ignorant to some of the challenges faced by men of color. And so sometimes there's even more harm caused by accessing not just mental health care. I mean, this is true in healthcare in general. So for me, as I was thinking about my studies and what I wanted to focus on, I thought a way that I could contribute meaningfully to the conversation was to think about what would it look like if we did a better job supporting our Black men, not only having access to mental health care, which means taking away barriers like lack of insurance, on and underemployment, healthcare deserts around the country, so many of these factors, and then the cultural barriers, everything that says you shouldn't, or, the impact of like the institution of the church and how like, as a Christian, I know I grew up like, and it was about praying it away. And, and so there was this resistance to like formal healthcare. And then there's the institutional barriers and things like the fact that men of color are far more likely to be misdiagnosed, to be given the wrong medications, to be incarcerated as a result of their mental illness, right? So for me, I thought, how could we create a space where Black men could try to process and heal from all of the trauma of existing as a Black man in this country without risking more trauma?
I think the conversation has definitely changed, especially recently, in terms of mental health. Definitely in terms of race, which is hilarious to people of color. We're just like, oh, it took murder on camera to get you guys talking about how police brutality and, institutional racism is still kind of a problem in America. It hasn't gone anywhere. And we can give you a number of examples throughout history, but that's neither here nor there. But definitely mental health. We talk about it on the show. As somebody also who struggles with depression and anxiety, understanding that talking is important. It's very important. And, I feel like when you're a creative, it's even more important because, you've got this tremendous responsibility. You've got this talent and this gift, which just and depression, anxiety doesn't go away. It's just there. Like, hey,
Yeah.
remember me? Like, so I think the conversation is definitely changing, changing for the good because it's becoming more normalized. And you know, I just see more breakthroughs because the conversation has begun, and that can only be good, especially with the way knowledge is so accessible today in 2022.
Yeah, and I think we have to do better in setting Black men up for success, because we could just talk about the destigmatizing and, you know, what would it look like to convince Black men in general, that they should access therapy and that like this would add value and help, right? But then it's like we do that, and then you go and you're micro and or macro aggressed by your therapist, or you're given a bad diagnosis, which leads you down a dangerous road of medications. And to be clear, I'm not saying medications are dangerous, but if you're on the wrong ones, they can be, right? And so I think that that's the piece that I feel really passionately about, is like, how can the system do better by men in order to reduce harm?
DK, you are the showrunner. He's the showrunner. He calls all the shots.
Yes, King.
Do I? No, I'm curious. Like, what's the goal? Well, actually before. Now, let me stay on topic with this one. Like, is it just something you're just interested in? I know there's like this aspect of just like learning this information, but like, what do you want to do with this? Like, do you have a goal in mind? Like, once you kick off once you get all this money from this comedy and you start directing a show where you cast the babies on a recurring role, then you got all this money. We started in school, girl. We started in school.
Ashley Michelle Rhymes.
Hey.
Here we go.
I love
Here we
this.
go. Here we go.
I love
Here we
this.
go.
Am I like I'm like a hybrid of like Tyler Perry and T'Challa? I'm just like building compounds and changing the world. No. Well, we'll get a permanent studio space for the base. That'll be the first thing, right? Ew. No, but I think that like ultimately I want to continue on in entertainment, because I think that I have a unique angle to help bring light to issues and to just tell stories, because I'm not a fan of trying to force feed people into perspectives or ideas, but I believe in the power of dialogue, and I believe in the power of storytelling. Stories have transformed the way I have thought about things so many times in my life. I think about eras where I was like super ignorant, maybe had like really discriminatory or biased perspectives, and I was able to like have some personal connection to it, get to know somebody, hear their lived journey, hear their feelings, and it changed me. And so I think a big goal that I have is taking care of my people, because again, it's not lost on me that there is an entire community of humans that have invested in me and continue to invest in me in such humongous ways and in sacrificial ways that I'm not attempting any level of success or notoriety just for the hell of it, and I'd be just as well not to ever be famous. But to be able to have access to resources and the influence to improve the conditions for the people I care about, that's always the goal. Whatever I'm doing in my life, I always want to work on increasing access and removing barriers. So, sometimes I think about, the future and like writing my first comedy special, or, starring on my first TV show or something. And like, for me, when I think about these things, it's like, I'm building a team. I'm like, okay, this person definitely needs to be in my writer's room. This person can manage my PR. This person, and it's not like this gross nepotism of like, oh, I'm just giving jobs to like people that I love or that I'm related to. But it's that I have spent my entire career cultivating this community of hyper talented, interesting people that I want to ride with all the time. I use the silly example all the time of Adam Sandler. If you look at Adam Sandler, for better or for worse, he rides with the same people. the same people get roles in his movies. People who like don't get cast in anything else have a guaranteed spot on his roster. You know, the friends he vacations with are the same people. The people he was riding with 20, 30 years ago are the same people he's riding with now. And like, that's the kind of universe I want to create where I'm taking care of my people and they're taking care of me, right? That there's this mutually beneficial, reciprocal energy out in the world that we're then all investing in our communities to make better. So what I want to do with the specifics of what I'm doing, I don't know. But I think that it's just about like, how do we keep conversations going? And, you know, I have this like silly, lofty, doe-eyed goal of just trying to make the world a better place. So every day I'm just looking at like, what can I do to get us a little closer there?
You're already doing it, Ashley Michelle. You're already doing it.
You should do a comedy show about getting elected into that White House as a comedian, and then use that as your marketing thing to actually run for office.
So basically the origin story of Donald Trump. So just
yeah.
Just go for it. Just go for it.
I love it. But I don't fuck with McDonald's, so it'll be slightly different.
Hey, listen, the breakfast sandwich is still hit, man. I don't care nobody say.
Oh wow.
No, but I'm definitely not looking to run for political office. That's the last thing I'm interested in. But yeah, I like telling stories and I like amplifying other people. So it's like, you know, and one of the things that has benefited me in the industry is people who are ahead of me, who are looking out for me, you know, like, you all mentioned earlier, this year I performed on the legendary world famous Laugh Factory stage in Hollywood. It's one of the most famous comedy clubs in the entire world. And some comedians spend their entire career trying to get time on that stage. And my first year of comedy, I was able to do that. And, you know, and I had...
Talk your shit.
Listen,
Flexing.
This ain't no humble
Flexing.
brag. It's just a brag.
Like, it took you a whole fucking decade. I got out of bed. I was like, you know what? This pandemic shit is corny. Let me go to the Laugh Factory real quick.
Just because.
Just real quick.
What you doing tomorrow? Laugh Factory. Why?
Listen, I graced that stage, and they're lucky I did.
Oh.
Nah,
That's
Enrique.
I just got here. Oops. Success.
That's
Oops.
why that scarf costs $500,000. Sidebar.
No, but you know, I mean, the thing about that night that was super special. I mean, there was so much, but like, I think I had about 20 of my family and friends in the audience, and like living in New York and being across the country and like having a crew that deep, I was just like, look, if I totally bomb tonight and they're like, this bitch ain't never performing here again, I already won, because that's the amount of loved I am, that I could like be out in LA on the exact opposite coast and have like that level of support. So, you know, it just so happened I didn't bomb, and I'll be back, Laugh Factory. But, you know, and actually I'm going out to LA this weekend, and I'm going to be performing at Flappers Comedy Club out in Burbank, which I've performed many times. And I've just had so many cool opportunities there. I've performed in Colorado and New Jersey and Philadelphia and New York. You know, I've been able to take this around the country, and that's been really meaningful. So yeah, I think for me, it's just about like, how do I accept these opportunities that are presented to me with gratitude, and you know, just really express that to the people who are looking out for me. And then when it's my turn, how do I make sure I'm hooking it up for other people?
Talk.
If you
You
ever need somebody to open up for you, Ugo.
Yeah. Listen, he's more experienced than me. I might need to open up for him.
You never did Laugh Factory.
She's like, yeah, she gave the laugh like she didn't even believe that. She's like, I'm not being polite.
I don't know what these ragamuffins are talking about.
I need nothing for you.
I haven't done comedy. Dear God, probably since college. Probably 2009, 2010.
It only took me a year.
Exactly. Exactly.
Listen, I'm gonna bring you out of retirement. We're gonna do like Chris Rock and Kevin Hart.
Yo, she's been doing it a year and she's bringing you out of retirement. That's crazy. Yo,
Don't listen to Edwin. Don't listen to Edwin. There's a reason why his camera's on.
yo, Brett Favre.
There's a reason.
He's bringing you back.
Ashley
He's
Michelle.
like,
Ashley Michelle.
What's good?
I have another question for you.
Yeah.
Why you saying it so low? Why you say it so low like that?
Why I got so horny?
I
just
know.
now?
I feel like the interrogation's about to begin.
Yeah.
Is this practice for law and
Feds
order?
horny.
What's up
The
with
Fed-
Like,
What's up
I
with these?
love my daughter. I would never kill her. Go ahead, DK.
Nah, these two guys are being creeps. This is why they're gonna get canceled.
Ashley,
So,
I got
Exactly.
a question for you.
I'm not gonna give her a mission, bro. Why do you make me sound like a fucking video game?
Yeah,
I
that
know.
is kind of how you sound. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you did last summer.
It was like,
Yeah,
Ashley,
bro.
All right, so have you ever heard of this app called Clubhouse?
I have heard of an app called
I
Clubhouse.
also, I don't know
That was
if
a
you've
smooth
heard,
setup.
but you've been dubbed the queen of Clubhouse, bro.
Oh.
By me, because
Kinda.
you're always on it. No, you be fucking with that Clubhouse shit a lot. I've been on it a few times. There's some funny, crazy shit on it.
Yeah, there's everything. I mean,
actually,
yeah.
by
So,
proxy, she's the reason why you're on Clubhouse because she was the reason why I checked it out. So,
that's true.
What?
Yeah.
so,
Pat brought it up mad long ago. We all ignored him because he didn't do the good marketing you did.
yeah. You should be looking at yourself when you give that face. This is a you problem. You should be disappointing yourself.
You got to be better at marketing, bro.
Bet.
Listen, I may be the reason people are joining Clubhouse, but I'm probably also the reason they're leaving. But no, like,
That's
you know, so for anyone who's unfamiliar with Clubhouse, it's a social media audio only app that really rose to prominence during lockdown when obviously people weren't seeing as much of each other in person. And so it allowed people from all over the world to sign on and just have conversations with people they knew and with perfect strangers. I would say like my use of Clubhouse has definitely waned significantly when things started opening up and, you know, I could go back to like living a real world life. It wasn't as relevant. But the beauty of Clubhouse when I first joined it was that you had people from all walks of life with all kinds of experiences who were spending time on there in community and were like very generously giving of themselves. The reason I got on Clubhouse, you know, and I owe it to my sister, Sarah. She's a parenting expert and kind of, you know, she's known as the mommy blogger and just like an influencer in the parenting space. And she went on there with her business in mind and just kind of like, you know, creating community of parents and having these conversations. And she kept, you know, inviting me on the app and I really was not interested. But one day I went on and I actually saw the Laugh Factory had a space on the app and they were doing these comedy workshops. And I thought, wow, if there are like comedians on here and like pros, then I'll be able to like learn things and you know, kind of grow my network. And that's a big part of why I am where I am right now. And it's definitely a part of why I was able to perform at the Laugh Factory and so many other clubs. I made my debut performance at the Broadway Comedy Club. You know, the first time I ever got on stage, it wasn't for a mic. It was like for a proper paid gig, which is unheard of. And so it was these connections and these networks that really helped with that. I also always, what's that, Loso?
Fucking shit.
Yeah, I'm talking it.
You
I'm talking
bums
it.
can't even get booked in a phone booth. He's doing Cali. I feel like freaking Funk Flex out here. Bums.
And she does it so seamlessly. She's like, yeah, so like I got a paid gig first time.
Yeah.
That's never heard of. Anyway.
That's unheard of.
Go and brush my shoulder off. No, but you know, I think my point here being that like it's really that network and that community of people who like I think the lockdown gave us a unique circumstance where in an industry that's usually very cutthroat, very like dog eat dog, you know, do anything you need to do to get ahead. All of a sudden, everybody was in the same boat. nobody had like real audiences. Nobody had like any, like, there was no like status. It was just like, we're all in our homes. Some of us have nicer homes than others, but like, we're all in our homes and we're all limited to these kinds of interactions. So, you know, like I would go on Clubhouse and have conversations with people like Tiffany Haddish, Kevin Pollak, Caroline Rhea, you know, just like people were like, you know, I listened to this incredible interview with Henry Winkler, and it was like stuff like that where, and then, you know, of course, there's all of these working comedians who are like professional full-time comedians who maybe don't have as much name recognition, but are out there doing the thing. And so I was able to learn from them and draw from that. And so, so that was really the big impetus for me being on Clubhouse. And then, like I said, when things started opening up and we weren't in lockdown anymore, it just became less necessary because the friendships and the networks were kind of made. I will say, yeah,
I too was on Clubhouse in its beginning journey,
what?
and I told these fucking
Okay,
losers
nobody cares. Okay, Ashley, keep talking. Nobody cares.
to join fucking Clubhouse.
Why are you so
And they
bitter?
didn't
Okay, just go, Ashley.
Loso,
Did you really interrupt her for that? Please.
And we should have joined forces.
The
Please.
toxicity.
Together.
The toxicity of
Not
our
system of a
city.
down.
Oh God, nobody cares. Oh
cities.
no.
Honestly, Ash,
Oh,
I'm about to
God.
do it too.
Why do you want
Loso,
this
I
order?
know that
God.
you are a
Disorder.
trendsetter and you're ahead of the curve. And I'd like to work with you on developing the next big app.
We got to, because fuck
Yeah.
these guys, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
and we're not even inviting them in at the beta stage.
Oh
like,
wow,
you know, we're
that's
just doing our thing.
crazy.
just
I'm open-minded to marketing. Can't speak for everyone.
I can't believe
The toxicity of our cities, of our cities.
No, Ash, you was probably in the same room when Tiffany Haddish and Kevin Hart had the issue. I don't know if you remember that. I was there for that. I was there for the Lion King. They did the Lion King live. There was also it was a couple birthdays that passed over during the pandemic when they had the celebrities celebrate their birthday. Clubhouse was huge.
It was a whole other vibe back then.
But what I will say about Clubhouse is that it didn't give credit to who actually gave them their jump, like which
The blacks.
people. Yeah, which is our people, and because of that, they hit their wall where they should have been promoting and expressing the gratitude for how we propelled their app to where it is. They silenced us, one, and then they started moving the app differently, and everybody was like, yo, fuck this app, bro. We could go see each other in person. But Clubhouse
100%.
Clubhouse definitely opened a space where people who were quiet or couldn't meet celebrities were easily jumped into a room and expressed themselves to a celebrity and became a celebrity like literally overnight. Literally overnight.
That's right.
It was just crazy, man. But it was like when the Kevin Hart shit happened, he used Clubhouse platform to speak to the whole issue he was going through, and then Tiffany Haddish, that kind of caused her downfall in a way because she got into like that whole argument battle where they were like dissing each other and she lost.
She's good though. She's good.
Well,
she's making a lot of money.
I haven't seen the movie.
She's making a lot of money.
I haven't seen the movie.
Did you hear about her and Ari Spears? Do I need to drop this breaking news? Ari Spears and Tiffany Haddish?
Yeah.
Did they get into it over Lizzo?
No. Apparently, they're involved in a potential alleged grooming scheme from a Funny or Die video that was produced several years ago.
Oh, wow. Well, that's not good.
Yeah, Tiffany Haddish stays taking the L's.
That's not good. Yikes.
She stays taking them L's. But I love you, Tiffany. Let's do something. Be ready.
Let's do something while you're still around. Yo. We gotta clip this and send it to her inbox ASAP.
Yeah, put this on your demo reel. Okay, before you get canceled, let's just do a quick 5-10 minute set. Thanks.
Tiffany, unless you're proven guilty, I ride with you, girl.
Exactly.
My experience with Clubhouse was completely different. I just felt like it was like 4chan, bro. It was like it was said on that shit, son.
There's different. I mean, it's just a microcosm of like the internet. You know what I mean? You know, you have the 4chan side, you have the big conspiracy side. What really what really pulled me in were like the COVID denier rooms, and then
we had a whole episode about.
And then they actually had the doctors.
Listen, Ed stays on some fuck shit because he goes into like the most problematic room. Like if you didn't know him and you didn't know that he was just going in for the soap opera drama, like you would think this man is the most problematic person we all know because he'd be going into rooms like. Why are black men preferring aliens over black women?
Yo, the alien shit.
Crazy. Like, yo, what else? They have like the worst rooms are like not like the COVID denier rooms, but like when everyone clashes, it gets nuts. Because you'll have like actual geneticists, doctors, PhDs arguing with fucking essential oil enthusiasts. And, you know, half the room actually thinking that these people are like winning the debate. Like it's it's so weird.
Just because you talk loud doesn't mean that you're right. That's number one. And number two, one of my favorite is when Jay-Z, he did a Clubhouse a couple months ago. And they were asking him, would he ever do a versus? He was just like, are you serious? Like, he's not losing. Jay-Z's not losing versus, unless he goes against Kanye or Drake.
I think like Loso is bringing it back to like where Clubhouse started, and DK and even Ed. Like when you joined, it had just evolved so differently, and I think there was something so unique about the fact that like people were locked down and didn't have a lot of options otherwise. I mean. Those of us who started, like we would spend literally all day, every day on the app. Like there were days that I was convinced I was going to lose my job because I was underperforming, like towards the end of just like kicking it on Clubhouse. So, you know, like it was a whole different vibe. And I think that there was so much more creation happening. And, you know, it was so right that like, that was so heavily on the shoulders of Black and brown creators. And there was a lot of co-opting and there was a lot of theft and there was just underappreciation. And so I think like people basically made the networks they needed and they dipped. You know, there was a time when I used to do sets on Clubhouse multiple times a week. And then when they introduced a give money feature and now you could start like sending money to other users. I mean, I'd make a few $100 extra on the side, just like performing, telling jokes, you know, but like, nowadays, there's not really any motivation. There I go with my humble brag. Like, did you catch that one? But no, you know, but I think like for me, it's like, there's no value to me doing that these days because there's such a reduction in the audience on Clubhouse. And it seems like the people who are super users at this point are people who don't have a lot of options for like, you know, non-virtual lives, you know, people who have like very serious immunocompromisations that keep them home, or people with like severe mental health issues that, you know, get to use this space to be who they always wish they could be. Whereas like for me, I really have developed some incredible friendships, professional networks, and I found the love of my life on Clubhouse.
Aww.
Hey, Angel.
It's I'm glad you mentioned that because this podcast, COVID is going to be known amongst a million other poor things. One good thing that did come from COVID, one of the few, podcasting did explode. It really did, you know, and a lot of people found their footing in it. I know I'm speaking, for example, from experience. I certainly did. And, you know, DK invited me to join the base during COVID. I think it was like March or April of 2020. He's like, yo, bro, you know, you want to be a host? I was like, hell yeah, why not? And, you know, I eventually started my own after it, you know, so it's like, again, finding your footing, finding something that, you know, but at the same time, like you had mentioned too, like now the rules change because now everybody has a podcast. Everybody has a microphone. Everybody is doing it, so to speak. But what separates it, aside from the talent, is of course the marketing, which you talk about all the time on this show. But like you mentioned, putting it together a team and putting together the necessary steps and the necessary personnel to help you break through the algorithm matrix that is Agent Smith versus Neo. And I for one am super excited for the future of this show, the future of my own personal show, your future as well, and all the things that that venues like this and spaces like this is opening up the dialogue and the channels to network and build and create. I think it's a beautiful thing.
I want to clarify: we are not a podcast; we are a show. Little kids make podcasts; adults make shows.
Okay.
Base show.
Speak your truth, sir.
I got
fucking babes, baby. Talk your shit.
Season.
So, Ashley,
SZN.
Yeah, what's that?
what can you plug? What are you going to plug? Where can we find you? What's your next situation? You said you're going to be Flappers in Burbank, but where can people find you?
Yeah, I guess it'll depend on when this show airs, but I think the best way to keep in touch and know what's going on for me is follow me on Instagram. My handle is Ashley_Michello. So drop the E in at the end of Michelle and replace it with an O, and that's me. And there's also a link in my bio to get on my email list. So if folks prefer that level of communication, we can do that. And yeah, I try to be in LA multiple times a year. I'm based out of New York, but I also am an avid traveler. And so, and I will travel to get paid to tell jokes. So if anyone watching or listening, wants to hire me, I see you, I got you. And yeah, I would say just be in touch. I try to just be like really open and authentically me. And I got Mike Pence's fly over here in my room. I don't know why. Maybe there's some tea that's about to come out.
You made the Tiffany Haddish joke and he just buzzed in like, hey, what's up?
So I feel like, speaking about getting canceled, I feel like I've like burned some bridges on this podcast. You all fucked me up and like, I'm never working in this town again.
If you want us to mute, we could just, when we mention Tiffany Haddish, we could just do like a beep. We know.
Oh, I'm going to do the dolphin noise like I did.
The dolphin noise.
I did D-Wade.
Oh, not the Justin Bieber. Is it too late now to say sorry?
Yeah.
I love it.
Nah, and I am still on Clubhouse. I don't go on very much, but you can definitely find me on Clubhouse and all the usual socials. So I'm always excited to get to know people, to connect, and you'll see like all of my wild ass life, which is not that wild at all. It's pretty boring, but I just looking forward to seeing people out on the road. And if you're interested in what's going on, just say hey.
Hey.
Yeah, oh girl, I love the way she do it. She get low like it's nothing really to it. She pick it up and she spin it back around and she get it from my mama. Damn, I knew it. Enzoku, Enzoku, Enzoku. Nice job, boy. Ibu Kwenu, yeah, that's true. She move her hips so proper. Yeah, and she look like Rihanna.